The snow fell in slow, whispering sheets that muffled the sounds of the city, turning honking cars and hurried footsteps into distant echoes. The night glowed orange beneath street lamps, halos of light shimmering through the flurries, but the cold was merciless, biting, relentless, unforgiving. And in that freezing stillness sat a tiny girl in a rusted wheelchair, her torn red dress stiff with frost, her legs trembling from cold she could no longer feel. Every breath she exhaled came out white and shaky. Her mother had kissed her forehead only moments before, brushing her hair back with trembling fingers. Then she whispered, "I'll be right back," and walked away toward the bus stop's shadow, without turning back. Minutes passed. Then more. The woman never returned. The world kept moving, but the little girl stayed there, abandoned, scared, and too young to understand why the person she trusted most had vanished into the night. If you believe in kindness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us spread more stories that remind the world what compassion truly looks like. The child's tears froze before they could roll down her cheeks. The city was busy even in the snow, people passing by with heads lowered, shoulders hunched, each step fast and focused, as if the cold was urging them to ignore anything that didn't directly affect them. They glanced at her, perhaps feeling a moment of pity, but no one stopped, until a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its tires crunching through the ice. The headlights cast a warm glow on the girl's frightened face, illuminating the redness of her small hands gripping the sides of the wheelchair. A tall man stepped out of the car, dressed in a dark coat that contrasted starkly against the white snow. He didn't look like someone who belonged in the cold, he carried the air of wealth, success, something polished and untouchable. Yet the moment his eyes landed on the child, something within him cracked open. He knelt in front of her, the snow settling lightly on his hair and shoulders. The girl blinked at him with wide, trembling eyes, so full of innocence and confusion. He saw her discomfort, her ragged clothes, her tiny fingers almost purple. And there on her cheek, a faint, fading bruise that tightened something deep in his chest. His name was Damon Hayes, a man whose life was built upon control, precision, and a hardened exterior that years of business rivalry and loneliness had carved into him. But in that moment, none of that mattered. In that moment, the city blurred away, leaving only this fragile child and the overwhelming need to protect her. The surrounding streetlights glowed softly, casting a golden shimmer on her pale face. Damon gently brushed the snow from her hair, his mind racing as he tried to understand how a child her age, especially one with limited mobility, could be left alone in such an unforgiving environment. The girl looked up at him as though he were the first safe thing she'd seen in a very long time. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak but didn't know how to begin. Or perhaps she had learned long ago that speaking didn't make adults stay. The snowstorm intensified, wind sweeping the street with harsh gusts that tugged at her thin dress. Damon glanced up and down the sidewalk, hoping to see someone, anyone, rushing back for her. But the only things that moved were strangers who avoided his eyes, cab lights fading in the distance, and flurries that danced like tiny ghosts in the air. His brows furrowed. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. He lifted the girl into his arms gently, and she didn't resist. In fact, she laid her head on his shoulder in a way that suggested she had never been held like that before, or hadn't been in a long time. Her fragile trust made Damon swallow hard, a feeling he couldn't remember experiencing since he himself was a child. He opened the back door of his car, carefully placing her inside, wrapping his coat around her small body to warm her. The moment she felt the heat, her eyes fluttered closed for a second, as if the warmth was too precious to waste. Damon made sure the wheelchair was secured in the trunk before getting back inside. The heater blasted warm air, fogging the windows slightly as the storm outside grew harsher. The girl slowly lifted her gaze toward him again, studying his face with quiet curiosity. Her innocence was disarming. Damon wasn't used to this vulnerability, not from others, not from himself. He had built walls around his emotions for years, but they cracked now, slowly and painfully, in the presence of this child. As they drove through the snow-covered streets, Damon's mind drifted unwillingly to his own childhood. He remembered cold nights spent alone, a father who was emotionally distant, and a mother who died too young to imprint any lasting warmth in his memory. He had grown up learning to fend for himself, learning that the world didn't give second chances. Yet here he was, holding a child's future in his hands. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he could not leave her. The drive to the nearest hospital felt like an eternity. Damon carried the girl inside, his expensive shoes slipping slightly on the wet floor as nurses rushed to help. They checked her vitals, wrapped her in warm blankets, and examined her legs, which were weak and underdeveloped, suggesting long-term disability. Damon watched every moment, refusing to leave her side. He had never been this invested in anyone before, not in business, not in relationships, not in anything. Something indescribable pulled him toward her, as if fate had drawn a line straight from his heart to hers. Doctors later confirmed what Damon had already suspected. The girl was malnourished. Her disability required regular care, therapy, and support she clearly hadn't been receiving. She had no identification on her, no documents, nothing that said where she belonged. Only her torn dress, worn shoes, and the wheelchair with chipped paint and rusted wheels. Damon clenched his jaw as he listened. No child should endure what she had. When she woke in the hospital bed hours later, the storm had calmed outside. The city lights shimmered against the window, casting a soft glow in the room. The girl looked around nervously until she saw Damon sitting in the chair beside her, his posture relaxed but his eyes gentle. She reached out her small hand toward him. He took it without hesitation. In that simple gesture, something unspoken passed between them: trust, connection, something deeper than logic. Days passed, and Damon became a constant presence in her recovery. He brought her toys, warm clothes, even books with bright pictures. Nurses whispered about him in the hallways, surprised that someone so wealthy and reserved could show such tenderness. But Damon didn't care about appearances. He cared about her. He learned her name, Lila. A name that felt soft and delicate, yet carried a quiet strength. As Lila grew more comfortable, her personality blossomed. She laughed softly, smiled shyly, and clung to Damon's hand during physical therapy. She reminded him of the parts of himself he had buried long ago, the parts capable of love, vulnerability, and compassion. And slowly, Damon realized something profound: Lila wasn't the only one who needed saving. In his own way, he did too. When authorities began searching for the mother, Damon cooperated fully, though each step filled him with dread. The thought of Lila being taken away stabbed at him in ways he didn't understand. But the truth eventually emerged: the mother had been overwhelmed, battling addiction and homelessness, unable to care for her disabled child. She had left Lila at the bus stop believing someone kind would find her, hoping her daughter would be given what she herself could not offer. The revelation crushed Damon's heart. Not because he judged the mother, but because the world had failed both of them so brutally. He made a life-changing decision then, one that shocked even those closest to him. Damon Hayes, the untouchable CEO, filed to become Lila's legal guardian. The process was long and filled with challenges, but Damon refused to give up. He attended hearings, completed evaluations, transformed part of his penthouse into an accessible space with ramps, soft rugs, and special equipment. Lila's room became a warm sanctuary filled with storybooks, soft lights, and a small music box that played a gentle lullaby. Every detail mattered to him. The day Lila was officially placed in his care, Damon held her close as tears filled his eyes, tears he didn't bother to hide. He whispered a promise in his heart that he would give her a life filled with warmth, safety, and love. And from that day on, the lonely CEO who once walked through life with an empty heart now had someone to live for. If this story moved you or reminded you that kindness can change a life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these meaningful stories alive.